It is now my great privilege to introduce our close partner and keynote speaker. Andrea Bell is the Executive Director of Oregon Housing and Community Services, where she oversees the strategic direction, vision, and growth of the state agency responsible for providing stable and affordable housing across Oregon. In her previous role with OHCS, she served as Director of Housing Stabilization, where she led the implementation of a wide range of homeless services, energy and weatherization assistance, rental assistance programs, and policy initiatives. Bell's previous experience across the housing continuum prepared her for her current role as OHCS Director. She served as a housing director within the Arizona Medicaid system, where she directed the operations and expansion of state-funded permanent supportive housing programs, as well as deployed sustainable solutions to end homelessness. She also spearheaded Arizona's first tax credit project using Housing Trust Fund resources and led the Governor's Housing and Health Initiative aimed at providing long-term housing opportunities for people experiencing homelessness. Please join me in welcoming Andrea Bell.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. How are folks doing today? You guys awake? Good, good. More coffee, of course. Well, first of all, let me just say I am so thankful to be here. I am so grateful to be in your presence this morning. Certainly to Commissioner Gordon, to Mayor Hoare, to all of our elected officials. I want to just start by extending an immense amount of gratitude for holding the vision for what our community can be. Whenever we are in a space together, individually and collectively organized, it always reminds me and sort of takes us back to the roots of why we do this work, which is that we are in service to our beloved communities, and each of us are here because we have a central heartbeat really aimed at the people that we serve. And so I want to just acknowledge the collectiveness of our shared values. Now, Mayor Hoyt, you know I was gonna be quiet and not mention anything, but since you were such a hoot this morning, I have to do it. I will just say, I spend quite a bit of time with Mayor Hoyt, particularly now. He probably sees me and hears from me more than he would ever want to. And you are in rare form this morning. I will just have to say, when you see the mayor sort of, cinch back in his seat or cringe at seeing a jacket that he's wearing, I will just say you are in rare form, and I am here for it every day, all day. So I just want to acknowledge and appreciate that, and also say that we're going to have real talk conversation, and you will see this jacket at least 15 times, and there are my same rounds of clothes you will see at least 15 times, so that is what we do to focus on the work. We don't get so bogged down in the aesthetics of that. But let me just start by saying there are a lot of familiar faces that I see here today, and so many new faces, and certainly since I have served as the executive director of our state housing agency, it has been a while since I have been in front of all of you together. And over the last year, I would say certainly that so much has changed across our state. We're coming out of, so many of us, and some more than others and in different ways, we're coming out of some of what has been some of the toughest years on an individual level, on a personal level, on a public service level. We've all been coming out of that. And as I am reflected and also hear Amber and David's story, it also gives me such a place of strength and solace. And it is very much the reason that we show up every day to do this work. It is in pursuit of progress in real ways. And so I just want to acknowledge and lift you up for what you've brought with us today. Now, a lot has changed over the last year, but I think it's today it is also worth mentioning what hasn't changed. We talk a lot about what has changed, and I think particularly on the tough days, it's really easy to sort of find ourselves in a place of maybe a little bit of cynicism. But let me just say what hasn't changed. We are here today because in this room, we do not accept We do not accept homelessness as a fact of life. We're here because what hasn't changed is we don't accept housing instability as a fact of life. And also what hasn't changed as well is that in this moment and over the next few years, it is going to take all of our best players together, collectively pushing for meaningful progress. And when I say meaningful progress, at the end of the day, any community, any state, any country is going to be judged by how they showed up for people. And it's not about numbers or abstracts, but how are our people doing? What are the stories that our elected officials hear? For the service providers in the room, what are the hardships that you hear from folks, and what is that experience, and how does that vary based on who you are, whether you're a Black, Brown, and Indigenous person, whether you're in a rural community? Are we, and how have we been fighting for progress collectively that everyone can feel? Now, also, I think what's also important to acknowledge is where we stand in this moment. And I mentioned at the top we're going to have real talk conversation today because too much is at stake, and we have our collective sleeves rolled up, so none of us have time for nothing other than real talk conversation today. Is over the last few years, we have achieved shared progress that you all have been instrumental in, and I think it's really important to get clear about what that progress has looked like. So over the last few years, we have increased the number of affordable rental housing across the state by 23,000. That's from 2019 to this very moment. 23,000 keys have been offered. It is important to acknowledge that because when we set out collectively in that goal in 2019, that was the most affordable housing that we have produced in our state historically. So I think it's important to be very clear about that progress, 23,000. Specific to rural communities, we said that we wanted to increase the pipeline of rural housing development by over 70%. And to date, we have created more than 4,000 affordable homes, specifically in rural communities. That too is a first for the state of Oregon. Now, specifically when it comes to permanent supportive housing, which in its most basic form is affordable housing and necessary individualized services, we said that we wanted to create 1,000 units of permanent supportive housing in 2019 by 2025, and to date we have created over 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing here in the state of Oregon. And so, my friends, I say that not because our work is over, not because our work is nearing an end by any stretch of the imagination. I say that so that we can take a moment to do what I think many of us, many of you may not in your day-to-day work get a moment to do, which is really pause and see where we have made progress. And it's important to note that we have made that progress under the conditions and circumstances of the last couple of years when candidly we should not have, and we did. And the reason behind that is because that is what Oregon does. We do tough things even in really tough circumstances. And over the next few years, we're going to continue to be challenged, very real challenges. And my hope is that we can utilize that shared progress, that we can utilize the stories, and know that there are so many reasons to still feel hopeful and optimistic. And it doesn't mean that it's blind optimism. It doesn't mean that we don't see the challenges. It just means in spite of that, our options are very clear. Either we default to cynicism and get stuck there, or we do what you all do best, which is we push for progress. We fight like hell for change. And we do that through the lens of our collective humanity because we know what's at stake. You know what's at stake. Now, in this moment, when we talk about housing, it's also important that we really acknowledge, particularly as a government agency, again, we said we're going to have real talk conversation today. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but we are here because we're talking about shaping the future. Now, you don't need someone from a state agency to tell you how to shape the future. But what you probably do need is a true partner that centers your community and that tries to make your job even just a little bit easier. Create a little bit more flexibility. And maybe, if we're willing to go there today, not pretend like we have all of the answers about the community that you serve in and that you know really well. And so when we talk about shaping the future, it is not about a high-level aspiration. You all are already doing that. This is about how we can continue to shape the future, and in that, hold ourselves as partners, including us as a state agency, able and capable in showing up in true partnership, which may also mean power sharing. What a new phenomenon in partnership. So let me start with just a couple of things here. When we talk about the series of housing investments, and I'll go into a little bit about that, about what the governor is proposing, what's on the table right now. I think it's also important to know that when we push for housing progress, when we push for progress to serve people that are experiencing homelessness, whether that be unsheltered homelessness or otherwise, and homelessness in all of its forms, these are not just investments in a box. These are not investments only about one program. We're not only talking about housing in terms of sticks and bricks, we're talking about shaping who we are as a state. Housing is one of the few investments that is both an education investment, a behavioral health investment, a racial justice investment, and an economic investment all rolled into one. And so as we look to shape the future, it's also important that we hold that broader vision and understanding of this is about housing in the context of the health of our state, the health of our economy. Now, let me maybe just start and name a couple of things that you may already know sort of about the state of affordable rental housing here in the state of Oregon. Now, most of us in this room, I would maybe reckon to say all of us, we either personally have experienced housing instability in some way, or we know someone that has. That is an all too common experience these days. And right now, the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, when we zoom back to really understand what is at stake and what is the need, what it tells us is that we are currently experiencing a deficit of about 140,000 units across the state. So this represents the need right now in this moment. It also shows that we need about 580,000 new homes, so that's both market rate and affordable. And I don't know about you, but one of the most common questions that I get asked is, when are we going to be done with this crisis? I had someone ask me the other day, they said, "Director, give me the number. What's the financial figure that we need to invest in, and then when will we be done?" I said, well, sure, we could crunch another number. We could crunch a number of numbers, but that misses the whole context of where we're at. The number is daunting. The number is large. And so our work in this is to focus on one unit at a time, one household at a time. It is also important that we acknowledge that part of loving our community, Part of loving our state means not only singing its praises, it also means wrestling with some really hard truths. And some of those hard truths, if we can go there a little bit today, it's about how, to what extent we have had housing divestments over the last few years. It's about seeing the impacts that we're trying to untangle ourselves out of and not centering Black, brown, and Indigenous communities. It's often about federal policies that have been completely out of sync and have not been scaled in the way that they've needed. It is also about not having a clear and concerted pathway towards home ownership. We got home ownership lovers in here today. I see you, Emily. There's tons of us, yeah, home ownership. So it is important that we can wrestle with some hard truths. And the reason why I say that is because we're in a moment where we're pushing for historic resources, potentially the most resources that the state of Oregon has ever had in homelessness. And that's a wonderful thing. We need resources. We need more of it. And there's a lot of things that money can't fix. Think about the last couple of years with COVID. We were swimming in money. At one point, the federal government was like, can you take more? And we were like, let's look into it. More money's coming, more money's coming, more money's coming. I don't know, for any of you that were engaging in administration of those one-time resources may recall the money was coming quicker than the guidance was. And so we would have money and we're like, what do we actually do with it? And they're like, make it up as you go along. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure our auditors are about pulling their hair out right about now. But I take us back down memory lane just briefly, because what it highlighted for us and what we experienced was how difficult it is when there is no partnership. Money doesn't fix a lack of partnership. It's difficult to do things when there is very little relationship. Money doesn't fix lack of accountability towards outcomes. Money doesn't fix lack of coordination. Money can't fix people not talking who need to talk to build the system. I said we were going to have real talk today, and so I'm going there. And so it's important that we acknowledge that in addition to fighting for more resources, this is about doing our own work as a state agency, as a government agency, across local levels, to ensure that we can hold ourselves able and capable for having a system, a coordinated system that is mature enough to really catch those resources and allocate those resources as well. Now, when we think about this in the context of our economies, particularly when we think about rural communities to which housing has always played a really important role in the health of our economy, I want to just break this down a little bit so that it's really clear for us when we talk about the health of our economies and the relationship between housing and home ownership. I was talking to some of our folks recently in some of Oregon's rural communities, and we had a conversation about job vacancies. And when we started to learn around the extent to which job vacancies were either holding steady or increasing, we began to also see a correlation that housing costs played on those job vacancies. And so as it turns out, when there is a potential employer that has a job vacancy that continues to be vacant, and they can't get those jobs filled because the housing cost is simply too high, that's not just a missed opportunity for that worker. It's not just an inconvenience for that employer. That actually has a financial cost for that city, for our county, and for our state. And so when we think about the cost of housing, I want to continue to really make sure that we understand this is also about the health of our economies. It also turns out that if a person here in Mid-Willamette Valley is struggling to pay their student loans or struggling to pay their bills, that too has an impact on the economy. And so when we think about that question of who are we to one another as public servants, as service providers, as it turns out, we are much more inextricably linked than we ever thought. From a health perspective, from a community perspective, but also from a place of progress as well. And there used to be a notion that we had to choose between economic growth and economic inclusion. And I think what we have found over the last few years is that's a bit of a false choice. Our economies are stronger when everybody has access to getting their basic needs met. Now, moving on from looking at sort of the state of where we are at and what the need is, I mentioned that it was said that the common denominator of progress and shaping our future is not about numbers, but how people are doing within our communities. It's important to acknowledge that at the end of the day, the core solution to addressing homelessness is we need more affordable housing. There's a lot of complexities to it. Each story is unique and on its own, but it's important to acknowledge that we simply have and continue to have that tension between supply and demand of affordable housing. So over the next few years, through the lens of humanity, we will continue to be relentless in pushing for as much more production as we can across the state, and ensuring that when we do that, that we have a clear and concerted pathway for our rural communities to keep up the production within our small towns and rural communities across the state. And in that, building affordable housing has got more complex over the last couple of years. Some of the cost increases go up to 30% just for building more affordable housing, 30%. We haven't seen all of those costs continue to taper off, but my hope in saying that is not that it spurs, fear or angst, but that it provides a level of clarity so that we know what we're tackling and we can be in a place of shared transparency about that. It's also important to acknowledge that in addition to building more affordable housing, we also have to have parallel energy on preserving affordable housing. When we invest in affordable housing, I thought this was really interesting. I had a conversation recently as we were talking about our budget, and someone sort of inquired about why is there so much for preservation of affordable housing? And in that conversation, a light bulb sort of came on for me that there is not always collective visibility that when you invest in affordable housing, you don't get it forever. Our hope is that we can extend that affordability as long as we possibly can, but we don't get it forever. So it's important that we have very clear pathways for preservation of affordable housing. In fact, we have a development right here in Mid-Willamette that we are scraping and working together on to make sure that we can protect those units. But it is important at the state level, at the local level, that we have that strategy, because if we don't, we're kicking the can down the road, folks. So right now, our prism has to be both here and now and long term. That is what our work is to be able to hold that vision. Now, for anybody whose proximity to building affordable housing maybe is a little far away, I won't get too far into the technicalities here. But I want to share just one of the ways in which the state is going to have to step up our game to help make your job easier in building more affordable housing. So we have 9% tax credits, 4% tax credits, preservation, GHAP, permanent supportive housing, manufactured dwelling park preservation, ag tax credits, the list goes on. And with each of those funding sources come with a whole host of very fun regulatory requirements and paperwork. I'm seeing a lot of smiles. I can see the excitement in the room about that. I say all those things because there is an inherent mandate. Right now, we have a little over $1 billion in bond resources as part of Governor Kotek's budget. When I had a conversation with her as we were talking about the budget, and I'm sure she would say this, I was like, how big do you want to go here? I was like, because we can go big. And I said, well, let's go through what we've utilized over the last couple of years. And so now we have a little over $1 billion in bond resources on the table, which is a wonderful thing. I list out all of those funding sources, and I will just say that is just a few of them. And I haven't even got into home ownership yet. The reason why I say all of those things is the state is going to have to step up our game in process efficiency. You know, your mayor today is on. I am. Touche, Mayor. I'm going to hold that one, and I'll get back at you for that. And so I'm receiving that as no one. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'll take some takers. Typically, people don't think of state government and think speedy. I don't know. Efficient, optimized processes, automation. Right? People typically think regulatory, clunky, slow, I'll get back to you. The list goes outdated. Thank you. We'll stop there. We'll stop this table right here. The reason why I say all of that is there is an inherent mandate in this moment where we're going to have to change the way that we do business to make things more efficient. There's just no other way around it. And so my hope in sharing that candidly, just to be really candid with you, is to pull the curtain down a bit from a government perspective to say we cannot stay still. We cannot be operating under yesterday's problems. We have to be able to understand where we are at in this moment. We as a government agency, as a state government agency, have to be able to come to our partners to take constructive criticism and get better at our process. There is just an inherent mandate, and so I offer that to all of you, both as a commitment as the executive director, but also just to be able to model that the way forward together is going to require all of us, and we cannot hold precious to things that are not serving us today. And so it is both an offer to hold us able and capable, and I also want to share that so that if you see us seeking to shift and evolve and grow, I want to make sure that you know and understand the why behind that. I would also say that there is a shared call to action that here locally, the same mandate exists. We're coming from a place of shared values, and I don't think we ever question that. But our aspirations and our operations have to be in alignment, or we are going to feel the compression and inevitably not see the progress that we want to see. That is where communities find themselves a few steps behind. That is where state agencies across the nation fall flat, is the inability to evolve and to grow. And so I encourage you to be with us in that process for evolution and growth. And I'll just wrap up with a couple of other things I want to make sure that all of you know is Governor Kotek has set out a goal on the production side for 36,000 units of housing. Now, I mentioned at the top that we continue to have options and decision points in front of us. This is a moment here in this space where we can reflect, where we can engage and have honest conversations. But when we leave this space and go to our respective spaces, we are all going to be faced with decision points. Whether you're an executive director, a commissioner, a mayor, or a service provider, all of those decision points hold value and meaning. And I offer that because 36,000 units of affordable housing is a lot. I'm not sure everyone is fully on board with, can we really get there? And here's what I would say, folks. What is the alternative? Stand still. We can't just cross our arms and say, that's too ambitious of a goal. What we can do, however, is be really clear with ourselves and name what we need as a community, as a state, as a provider, wherever your respective seat is, wherever your respective space is. What I would encourage you to do is think about, as a community, what you need to get there. Whatever that resource need is, whatever that support is. But the option is not standing still. The option is not tampering down our progress because the ambition feels too great. We have a whole host of challenges stretched out in front of us, and our job has always been to come together, to galvanize, and to do really tough things. I got a call a couple of weeks ago from someone at the National Alliance to End Homelessness. And they asked me, do you know anybody from Marion Polk? It's like, just generally, anyone? Or I gave him your phone number, Mayor. I said, sure, we can put you in touch with someone. What do you want from them first? Don't go hitting them up, giving them issues or wasting their time. What do you want? They reached out specifically and named that Marion Polk specifically had been a model around homelessness. Yeah. So my hope, my friends, is that I know that there are immense challenges, and that might be even underselling it, saying challenges. I'm sure that there are moments, whether you're on the side of the room here or kind of in the back where I can't see your faces quite as clear, or folks that may not be here today. If this is ever recorded and finds its way out to folks that are doing service here in this community, I want you to know that you're seen, that your work is valued, and that you all have innovated above and beyond, and my hope is that you see that and know that. They talked for 30 minutes specifically around the work that was happening in the Mid-Willamette Valley. So I hope you all can see and really note the level of innovation that you all have continued to push for here in this community. And it is seen. It is seen across the state as a model, and it is seen nationally as a model. And I think it's important to really say and note that there is an incredible amount of innovation and work outside of the metro region of the state. Who is on the MAC group here? Is there anybody that's on the MAC group here? Yes, I know you are. Okay. Give these folks a round of applause. So, you all have been busy. We have kept you very busy over the last few weeks. We have an opportunity with one of the governor's executive orders, so 2302. There's a specific set of investments come, there's a very specific set of goals and outcomes that need to be met by January. I will just say one of the not surprising and continued areas of imprint that this community always leaves on me is the continued sleeves rolled up approach that you guys always have. You all were one of the few communities that took a really interesting approach in terms of race disaggregation to help inform your interventions. You guys came together with a coordinated approach that outlined very specific interventions based on the characteristics of homelessness in your community. I say that because that is what an effective system of care looks like. That is what an effective system of care looks like. And in this work as well, I think it's also important to really note that I understand that this is an accelerated time frame. It's not as though you all were twiddling your thumbs waiting for the next endeavor to come. I know that. But my hope is that this is an effort that can continue to support what was always our collective goal, which is to address homelessness, and that you can do this in a way, and that the state, that you feel that state support doing it in a way that is reflective of your community and not something that is being done to you. And so I want to just, on behalf of the governor, just acknowledge and appreciate all of the folks that are contributing on that MAC team in doing that work. Now, as our time dwindles down here, I want to just leave you with a couple of things, which is first and foremost, we need you. As partners, we need you. As experts, whether that be with lived experience, whether that be through your body of work, whether that be inspired by and sustained by the commitment to your beloved community, we need you. Any progress that we achieve as a state and as a community is never inevitable. It's not promised to us. And you all are here today because you have a strong sense of community, and what we know is that that sense of community is not given to us. It is something that we have to cultivate, it's something that we have to work for, it's something that we have to earn. And as we think about the diversity of this community and we think about the brilliance of this community, I want you to know that as a state, as a partner, we are committed to showing up for you to help pursue that progress in a way that helps accelerate what's already here in this community. So with all of that and with all of the things that you have and are pushing for in your community, thank you for your sweat equity. Thank you for laboring in love. And most of all, thank you for holding us as a state agency accountable towards that progress. Thanks for your time today.